Hi, welcome to Movies in My PJs. I am PJ, and the Academy Awards 2026 just around the corner. And as a pleasant surprise for me, as a Brazilian, The Secret Agent, a movie by one of my favorite directors, Kleber Mendonça Filho, and starring one of my favorite actors, Wagner Moura, was nominated in 4 categories: Best Picture, Best Leading Actor, Best International Feature Film, and Achievement in Casting. And all this is following in the footsteps of I'm Still Here at the 2025 Oscars, where it was nominated for Best Picture, Best Leading Actress, and Best International Feature Film. All in all, this makes this 2 of the best years Brazilian cinema has had in a long time. There is certainly a lot to be said about these films and many aspects that could be closely scrutinized, but the aspect I want to focus on the most is the historical moment both of these movies are set in, and the way each of them deal with that historical context, which to me is fascinating because what we have are 2 very different perspectives, both extremely important and both very particular. So, to start, I feel like I should explain the historical context both of these movies are set in. Between 1964 in 1985, Brazil was governed by a US-backed military junta that came to power through a coup and maintained itself in power through extreme institutional violence. That violence peaked in the 70s, which is exactly the decade both these films are set in. From that alone, I believe you can surmise that these movies deal with the trauma caused by that violence and with the effects of that brutality on everyday life, but they approach it in very different ways, and that is what I want to focus on. In I'm Still Here, we follow the Paiva family, with a special focus on Eunice Paiva as they live their lives amidst the somewhat distant Brazilian military dictatorship. They are a wealthy family. Rubens Paiva, Eunice's husband, is a former leftist congressman who was ousted from Congress because of his political views, and who, due to his continued political activism, is persecuted by the regime. The story that unfolds is based on the book by the same name written by Marcelo Rubens Paiva, his son, and the film is directed by Walter Salles, who was a friend of the Paiva family. And that right there is one major difference between these 2 movies. I'm Still Here is a real story, a memory of a real person, and a well-known, wealthy person. The Secret Agent, on the other hand, takes a very different approach to storytelling. First of all, it is not based on a single story, but rather on many accounts and narratives, all intertwined with the historical moment in which the film is set. It is not the story of a martyr, it is the story of many murders, all of them anonymous and whose stories are almost never told. And through that lens, I believe the director Kleber Mendonça feels much freer to depict violence in an explicit manner, something Walter Salles, being so close to the family and to Rubens Paiva's son, likely did not feel comfortable doing, given how close that barbarity hits to home. Personally, I don't really have a preference for either approach, although I must say that I'm Still Here manages to masterfully depict a violent atmosphere within its limitations. But these aren't even the biggest difference between these 2 films. My favorite contrast lies in how each of them deals with the memory of the dictatorship from such different perspectives. In I'm Still Here, the dictatorship is a shadow, always lurking, always present, even if sometimes at a distance. It is a system, a broken system, filled with coldness and evil. But in The Secret Agent, you could almost be forgiven for forgetting that it is set during the dictatorship at all. Save for a few moments when it is explicitly mentioned, it feels far away and its institutional agents are not personally threatening, at least not directly. The threat the dictatorship poses in this movie is the threat of enabling the actions of evil men. It is depicted less as a direct force and more as a facilitator of corruption. And personally, that resonated with me a lot. It's strange to say, but given the way these stories are structured, you think the more realistic one would be I'm Still Here. And yet, that family is so wealthy and so detached from the reality of the majority of Brazil that it can sometimes feel unreal. And then, The Secret Agents, the movie with a Harry Light that is a serial killer, was somehow able to make me connect more. That reaction surprised me and it made me stop and think, why did I'm Still Here, a movie I had originally enjoyed so much, suddenly feel less impactful to me? And then I realized something interesting. I'm Still Here is not really a real story. It is a memory of a son who was 12 years old, just a boy when his father was taken from him. The lens through which we see I'm Still Here is distorted, not in a bad way, but in a way that changes what we actually perceive. And that gave me a whole new perspective. It brought me right back to the film, realizing that we are seeing an idealized version of the story, almost a coming-of-age story in a way, for Marcelo, and that allowed me to peek behind the curtain and understand many of the choices being made. The setting is pure and almost fantastic, and Rubens is this amazing father, because that is how Marcelo remembers it. That's how he remembers him, and that got me thinking about my own father, who I'm lost over a decade ago now, and how many parts of him I remembered through that same lens, and suddenly the movie came back to life for me. What's interesting though is that The Secret Agent also has a very complex relationship with memory. First, through the perspective of its director, who makes a point of depicting a living city, remember what the city meant to him, and the tales and stories that were told during that time. But Kleber also makes a point of showing us the things we've forgotten, the trauma of a fragmented memory, a story that is fading away. We can see this in the scene set in the present, where Flavia listens to the audio recordings of what happened to Armando and everyone around her simply does not care. We see it in the cinema that has given way to a blood bank, and we see it in the son who barely remembers what his father was like. And that is despairing, to see those memories fading, to see no one caring, to look in the mirror and realize that I go on, that we go on, not caring either, not looking back, not making a point of remembering. And that is masterful storytelling and definitely a great experience. So those were my takes from these two films. I really enjoyed both experiences, different as they were. And of course, as a Brazilian, I am cheering for The Secret Agent. I really hope it does well in this year's Oscars. I'm especially rooting for Wagner Moura. He's been long deserving of that kind of recognition. That's it for this video. See you guys. Thanks for watching.